The morning at Windsor looked ordinary. Sunlight spilling across the castle lawns, children's laughter echoing faintly through stone corridors. Yet behind closed doors, William and Kate stood side by side, silent, their hands clasped in a gesture that carried more weight than words ever could. It wasn't anger. It wasn't scandal. It was something far more haunting, the quiet realization that love, once a fairy tale for the world, was now evolving into something different. Their composed goodbye would break millions of hearts without a single tear in public. Before we unravel this story of love, duty, and quiet courage, I'd love for you to join our community here. Tap like, subscribe, and share this video so others can experience this deeply human chapter of William and Kate's journey. And if you've ever faced a goodbye that reshaped your life, let us know in the comments. Your stories matter just as much as theirs. The morning sun broke over Windsor Castle with a kind of stillness that almost felt sacred. From Catherine's window, the gardens below were alive with ordinary beauty, gardeners pruning roses, birds darting across the lawns. Yet nothing about this morning was ordinary. Catherine stood quietly, fingertips grazing the cold glass, her gaze fixed but distant. To anyone else, it was just another day in the royal routine. To her, it was a day weighted with an unspoken truth. She sensed it. William sensed it. And though no words had yet been exchanged, the silence between them said enough. William entered softly, the carpet muffling his footsteps. His face, composed as ever, bore the faint lines of sleepless nights, the weight of documents and decisions that never truly left his desk. He tried, as he always did, to keep the burden hidden. But Catherine, after years at his side, could see it in the smallest details, the way he pressed his lips, the heaviness in his eyes. They didn't need grand declaration to understand one another. Over the years, they had developed a language of glances, gestures, and quiet observations. When Catherine remarked on how peaceful the gardens looked that morning, William knew immediately she wasn't really talking about the gardens. It was her way of naming the storm without naming it. For a moment, she moved to her dressing table, brushing her hair in steady strokes, her reflection catching William's gaze in the mirror. His eyes lingered on her, as though memorizing every detail, the curve of her hand, the fall of her hair, like a man afraid of forgetting. Catherine noticed, and in that instant, the truth settled over her. They were both preparing for something neither dared to say aloud. From deeper within the castle, the children's voices carried in like sunlight. George's laugh, bright and unfiltered. Charlotte's more measured tones, correcting her brother with the authority only a sister could muster. And Louis, full of boundless curiosity, asking endless questions of whoever had the patience to answer him that morning. Their joy was a reminder of what was at stake, and what must be protected at all costs. William crossed the room, resting his hands gently on Catherine's shoulders. She met his eyes in the mirror. The touch was tender, familiar, yet charged with an undertone of finality. It was the kind of gesture that held years of history, the storms they had weathered, the silent resilience they had built together. They had stood together through criticism and praise, through triumphs and private heartaches. To the world, they were a perfect team. But behind the smiles and ceremonial duties lay a truth harder to face. Love, as enduring as it might be, does not always stay the same. And sometimes, courage isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go with grace. The phone rang suddenly, its shrill tones slicing through the stillness. Neither moved to answer. Both knew what waited on the other end. Schedules, appearances, obligations. The machine of monarchy does not pause, even for hearts that ache. Catherine's mind wandered to the countless events they had attended together. The photographs, the polished smiles. Yet no camera had ever captured the subtle squeeze of William's hand at the small of her back, their silent code for, "We face this together." Irony lingered. That very unity, their gift, their shield, might also be what had quietly worn them down. For years, they had been experts at presenting a strong front to the world, but in the process, had they forgotten to protect themselves? William moved to his wardrobe, selecting his outfit for the day. Even in this simple act, Catherine felt the gravity of symbolism. Every shoot, every public step, Every word spoken, all of it would soon be studied for hidden meaning. Already, the subtle shifts were there, briefer touches, smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. She joined him by the window, the two of them standing side by side, gazing outward at a world that had always expected more from them than was humanly possible. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged, alive with what had not yet been spoken. It was a crossroads, one they both knew carried impossible choices. The public, who had invested their hearts in this love story. The royal family, who had embraced Kate as one of their own. And above all, their children, who deserved stability even in the face of change. William reached for her hand, fingers intertwining with instinctive ease. 15 years of love, partnership, and shared battles were held in that single motion. Catherine squeezed back. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear. Whatever comes, we do this with dignity. The morning stretched ahead, obligations waiting. Yet for that brief moment, they allowed themselves to pause, to live in the fragile space between what had been and what was about to begin. They knew the decision had already been made in silence, though unspoken. What remained was timing, careful words, and the daunting choreography of ending something without shattering it. As sunlight spilled across the room, illuminating their faces in a glow both beautiful and merciless, William and Catherine prepared to step into the most difficult role of their lives, a performance not of ceremony or duty, but of farewell. A farewell so quiet, so composed, that it would leave millions in tears without either of them ever shedding one in public. The morning at Kensington Palace began as so many had before, the chatter of children over breakfast, the gentle chaos of uniforms and school bags, William carrying little Louis down the staircase while George corrected him on some detail only an older brother could notice, and Charlotte, sharp-eyed, observing everything without saying much. But beneath that ordinary rhythm, there was a current running through the air. Catherine could feel it. William could too. Every glance, every silence between them carried a quiet gravity. After the children left with their security detail, the house fell into stillness. Catherine, almost deliberately, busied herself with dishes she could have left to staff. William lingered in the kitchen, watching her, knowing that soon, perhaps today, they would need to stop living in unspoken truths and start saying the words aloud. He broke the silence first. "I'll see Father this afternoon," he said, his voice measured. The words were simple, routine, even. Yet Catherine knew at once what he meant. This wasn't about schedules or public duties. This was about beginning the conversation that would change everything. That afternoon, William's car rolled through the gates of Clarence's house. The London sky was grey, heavy, as though mirroring the weight of what he carried inside him. Guards nodded respectfully, unaware that their prince was about to place before the king not just personal news, but a decision with ripples that would touch the entire monarchy. Inside, King Charles was waiting. He had chosen his private study, lined with books and softened with family photographs. It was no accident. This was not a matter for official staterooms. This was a father waiting for his son. The beginning of their talk was gentle, almost meandering. Updates on the children, mentions of recent public engagements. Yet Charles, with decades of experience reading people, saw it in William's posture, the way he held his words too carefully, the heaviness behind his eyes. And when William finally spoke, carefully, deliberately, the room grew still. He spoke of love, of years shared, of duty honored. But he also spoke of pressure, of the growing awareness that he and Catherine, while still partners in respect and purpose, were finding their paths bending in different directions. Charles listened quietly, his face composed but his thoughts racing. When he finally spoke, it wasn't as a monarch. It was as a man who had lived through his own turbulent marriage, his own public heartbreak. He spoke of Diana, of Camilla, of the impossible balance between personal happiness and the demands of the crown. His words carried the weight of experience and a kind of painful empathy. Across London, Catherine sat in her parents' Chelsea home, the modest house where she had once been simply Kate Middleton, long before cameras followed her every step. The familiarity of her childhood home brought a comfort that royal palaces never could. Her parents, Michael and Carol, listened intently. Pride and concern mingled in their eyes as Catherine explained with quiet strength the decision she and William were moving toward. They had seen her transform from a shy young woman into a confident princess, mother, and global icon. But now, they saw another kind of courage, the willingness to acknowledge when a chapter must close, even if the world wasn't ready for it. The conversation was tender, less formal than William's with his father, but no less heavy. Her parents promised support, reminding her that to them, she was not a princess or a figure on the world stage. She was simply their daughter. By evening, both William and Catherine had begun telling their truth, not to the world, but to the people whose understanding mattered most. For William, the discussion with Charles was both sobering and strangely reassuring. His father did not offer simple answers, because there weren't any, but he offered perspective, and above all, a quiet signal of support. For Catherine, her parents' embrace provided something rarer than royal protocol could ever allow: unconditional love, free of duty, free of judgment. Later that night, when William returned to Kensington Palace, the house was quiet again. The children were asleep, their laughter only a memory in the halls. He found Catherine on the terrace, a blanket around her shoulders, gazing into the night. "How was he?" she asked softly. William exhaled. "Better than I feared, harder than I hoped." The two shared a silence that was not empty but full of history, of the lives they had built together, and of the uncertain future waiting just ahead. They both knew the next steps would not be simple. There would be lawyers, advisors, communications experts. There would be meetings and statements to craft. But at its core, this was still their story. A love story, yes, but one that was evolving into something the monarchy and the public had never truly witnessed before, a separation carried out with dignity, grace, and an unshakable devotion to their children. And as the night deepened over London, William and Catherine sat together in quiet conversation, partners still, even as they prepared to say goodbye. The decision had been made. The words had been chosen with painstaking care. Now came the moment when private reality would become public truth. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when the announcement was scheduled to go out. The timing was deliberate, just after school drop-off, when George, Charlotte, and Louis would be shielded by routine while the world erupted. At Kensington Palace, Catherine sat at a desk, the final draft of their statement before her. The language was measured, deliberate. It spoke of respect, of friendship, a continued devotion to their children and their duties. It was not the cold, formal language the public had come to expect from royal communications. Instead, it carried a warmth that was unmistakably theirs. Across town, William sat in Clarion's house, preparing for calls with advisors, press teams, and government officials. The constitutional weight of his role meant that every word carried significance far beyond his personal life. Yet for once, he allowed himself to focus on the simplest truth. He and Catherine had chosen dignity over drama. At precisely 11 a.m., the statement was released simultaneously across official channels and news outlets. Within minutes, the world knew. Headlines flashed, anchors' voices cracked with surprise. Social media erupted. Sorrow, disbelief, admiration. Millions who had once celebrated their wedding now mourned their separation. But what struck people most was not the fact of the goodbye. It was how it was done. There was no bitterness, no blame, no spectacle. Instead, there was grace. William and Catherine had written a farewell that sounded less like an ending and more like the quiet evolution of a story that would always bind them together. Catherine stayed at Kensington Palace as the news broke, wanting to be there when the children returned home from school. She paced the familiar halls, absorbing the weight of knowing that the entire world was speaking of a family. Yet she held her head high, determined that when George, Charlotte, and Louis walked through the door, they would see the same mother who had kissed them goodbye that morning. William's day was filled with calls, meetings, and carefully managed responses. But by mid-afternoon, he too was at Kensington Palace, waiting with Catherine to greet their children together. When the car pulled up, the three children bounded out, greeted not by a fractured family, but by two parents standing side by side, hands joined, ready to face the cameras and the questions of the world together. The evening was intentionally ordinary. Dinner, homework, bedtime stories, the quiet rituals that made up the fabric of their lives. For the children, it was reassurance. For William and Catherine, it was strength. Later that night, after the house had gone quiet, they sat together once more, no longer as husband and wife, but as partners in something different, something equally profound, the promise of family, even after farewell. In the weeks and months that followed, the initial shock began to soften. What might have become scandal instead inspired conversations about love, resilience, and the courage to live authentically. Catherine threw herself into a charitable work with renewed passion, her voice carrying with fresh strength every speech and engagement. William deepened his environmental advocacy, producing a documentary that was praised worldwide for its honesty and emotional depth. Their children adapted, sometimes with questions, sometimes with tears, but always with a reassurance that both Mum and Dad were still present, still united where it mattered most. 6 months later, the world saw them again, side by side at a children's hospital they had long championed. They weren't standing as husband and wife anymore, but their easy laughter, their shared warmth, and the respect in their eyes reminded everyone watching. Some bonds are unbreakable. That was the essence of their silent goodbye. It was not a dramatic ending, but a gentle turning of the page, a decision to love differently, to honor what had been, and to carry it forward with grace. And for millions watching around the world, tears came not from disappointment, but from admiration. Admiration for a couple who had once embodied a fairy tale, and who now, in letting go, embodied something even rarer, authenticity. And so, William and Catherine's story, once the fairy tale of a generation, became something even more powerful. Not a tragedy, not a scandal, but a reminder that love can change form without disappearing. That even in goodbye, there can be beauty, dignity, and strength. Perhaps that's why their silent farewell touched millions so deeply. Because in them, we saw our own struggles, our own choices, our own hopes for endings that don't destroy, but transform. So now, I'll leave you with a question. What does true grace look like in the face of goodbye? If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the strength in your own journey, take a moment to like this video. It helps us share these stories with more people who need them. Subscribe if you'd like to walk with us through more powerful chapters of history, love, and resilience. And most importantly, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. And sometimes, the most extraordinary stories are not those of royalty, but the ones we carry in our own hearts. Would you like me to also create a shortened 1-minute trailer-style intro script you can use at the beginning of the video to instantly hook viewers before diving into Chapter 1? Anmer Hall had always been William and Catherine's refuge. Tucked into the Norfolk countryside, it offered something their London residences could never provide: privacy. Hey, they were not just a prince and princess of Wales. They were simply Mum and Dad. That weekend, however, the quiet retreat carried a different weight. William and Catherine had chosen this place deliberately. If there was ever a safe space to begin a conversation that could change their children's world, it was here, among the creaking floors, sprawling fields, and warm corners that had cradled so many family memories. Saturday morning unfolded in its usual way. George, nearly grown into his role as the eldest, was outside with William, hammering away at plans for a treehouse. Charlotte, with her keen eye for detail, helped Catherine arrange flowers from the garden, her small hands placing each stem with deliberate care. Louis, ever curious, darted between them, a messenger carrying questions, tools, and laughter wherever he went. From the outside, it was an ordinary family day. But both parents knew that, by sunset, nothing would feel quite the same. Lunch was set on the terrace, overlooking the gardens. As the children chatted about school projects and weekend plans, William and Catherine exchanged a glance, the kind of look two parents give when silently asking, "Are we ready?" William began gently. "You know," he said, his tone careful. "Sometimes families go through changes. It doesn't mean they stop being a family. It just means things look a little different." The children grew quiet. George looked at his father directly, his young brow furrowed in thought. Charlotte's eyes flickered between both parents, searching for clues. Louis, too young to grasp the weight of it, simply asked, "Like when we move the furniture around?" Catherine smiled softly, though her eyes carried tears she refused to shed. "Something like that, darling." The conversation unfolded slowly, in pieces, like a puzzle laid gently on the table. William explained that while he and Mummy would always love each other, they might not always live in exactly the same way as before. Catherine added that nothing would ever change how deeply they love their children or how present they would be in their lives. George, ever practical, asked the first hard question, will we still live here together? Charlotte, more sensitive, asked about feelings. Will you still be happy? Will we still laugh? And Louis, in his innocence, focused on the small comforts. Will bedtime stories still be the same? Each question pierced them differently, but both parents answered with the same steady truth. Yes, we will still be together when it matters most. Yes, there will still be laughter. Yes, there will always be stories at bedtime. The afternoon passed with a kind of fragile normality. They walked together through the woods, as they often did. The children ran ahead, their laughter echoing among the trees, while William and Catherine followed more slowly, shoulders brushing, hearts heavy. Catherine observed every small detail, George a protective glance toward his siblings, Charlotte's way of holding Louis's hand when the path grew uneven, Louis's trust in his parent to answer every curious question. These were the very reasons they were choosing honesty now, to preserve the foundation of love and trust their family had always known. That evening, they gathered in the sitting room. The fire crackled softly. Puzzles and board games lay scattered on the table, the usual signs of family time. But tonight, there was also a seriousness in the air, the kind that even children could sense. William and Catherine had prepared for this moment with care, consulting experts to find the right words, honest, but not frightening. They emphasized stability, love, and the fact that Mom and Dad would always be there no matter what. George listened intently, asking again about the when and how. Charlotte, ever thoughtful, asked about sadness. Will it hurt? She whispered. Catherine knelt to meet her daughter's eyes. Sometimes it will feel sad. Yes, but sadness doesn't mean things aren't okay. It means we're being honest about how we feel. And we'll get through it, together. Louis, restless, climbed into William's lap and asked the simplest, most grounding question of all. Will we still have pancakes on Sundays? William laughed gently, pressing a kiss to his son's head. Always, Louis, always. Bedtime that night took longer than usual. Catherine lingered in each room, smoothing George's sheets, kissing Charlotte's forehead, answering Louis's stream of questions until his eyes finally closed. Every small ritual felt both ordinary and extraordinary, as though she were imprinting each moment in memory. When the children were finally asleep, William and Catherine stepped onto the terrace once more. The Norfolk night stretched out before them, peaceful, almost indifferent to the weight of what they had just done. They are stronger than we thought, William said quietly. They've always been strong, Catherine replied. We just forget sometimes. For a long moment, they stood in silence, listening to the soft sounds of their home. It wasn't the end of the journey. It was only the beginning, but it was a beginning they had faced together, as they always had. In the days ahead, there would be more questions, more tears, perhaps, but there would also be laughter, traditions, and the steady reassurance of love that did not depend on titles or palaces or fairy tales. And as William and Catherine closed the doors of Emerald Hall that night, they carried with them the fragile relief of knowing that their children, in their wisdom and innocence, had given them the greatest gift of all, acceptance.